Hello, dreamers, and welcome once again to the show. This is episode 309 of California Dreaming, and I'm your host, Roseanne. This is the fifth and final part of our series on the 2020 murder of Gannon Stauch, carried out by his stepmother, Letecia Stauch. If you haven't listened to the first four parts of the series, you're going to want to pause this here, listen to those to catch up first, and then come back to this one. I do have a few notes about the show before we get started. This is an independent ad-free production, which means I depend on you, the listeners, to help keep us going, which means y'all are basically producers, and there are a number of ways that you can help produce. You can follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, and X, recommend us to your friends, family, and internet strangers, and if you're feeling somewhat ambitious and have a couple of dollars a month to spare, you can become a Super Fun Time premium subscriber over at Patreon. Starting at just $1 a month, you too can listen to stuff nobody else gets to except the tens of people who somehow managed to find their way over to the dozens of premium episodes I have over there on Patreon. Most of them are just like the free show, except they're not free. However, if a subscription just isn't your thing, but you still want to show your support, you can do so through PayPal using my email, californiapod@gmail.com. This week, I'd like to thank Cynthia D. in California, Jim C. in Florida, Lauren C., Melanie B., April G. in South Dakota, Carly S. in British Columbia, Canada, and Nicole C. in Australia, Karen C. in Virginia, Andrea, however you pronounce it, I'm so sorry. I don't know, and I don't have specifics because I think you opted out of receiving an email from me. Annalyn C. and Dolores in Michigan, thank you all so much for your support of this show. One more thing before we get back to this tragic story, I have to provide you with this warning. This episode contains details surrounding the murder of a child and may be difficult and or triggering to listen to. I will provide you with in-episode timestamps to fast forward to if necessary. Listener discretion is strongly advised. All right, let's get to it. In the last episode, part 4, we went over a good majority of the affidavit, the probable cause affidavit against Letecia Stauch that was drafted February 28th, 2020 by Detective Jessica Bethel. We left off where I was about to read some of Letecia's Google searches, so we will pick up the story from there. So I'm going to go ahead and read off the Google search history that's listed in the probable cause affidavit. And honestly, if the detective listed all of them from the days leading up to and following Gannon's murder, I would read them all too. But the detective probably picked out the ones that stood out to her. I've read some of them over the course of these episodes, and some of you have commented on how Letecia doesn't really seem to know how search engines work or what they're for. I've read them off randomly as we've told the story, but this is the list the affidavit compiled. I'll include the timestamp on these so we can see Letecia's thoughts evolve over the course of these days. And these begin on January 25th, 2020. That's Saturday. It is the day that Albert drove his mother to the Denver airport for her flight home and decided to stay there since it was about an hour and a half or 2 hours away from Colorado Springs, as he had a flight the next morning to Oklahoma for some job training. I'm not 100% sure when Albert and his mom left for the airport, but these Google searches begin just after noon on that Saturday, January 25th. Everyone is still alive and intact. Gannon is alive. Kobe Bryant was still alive, but with only about 20 or so hours to live. Gannon's own life will also come to a violent end about a day after that tragedy. Also, if there are any typos in Letecia's Google searches, I'm just going to read them off as to what I believe Letecia meant to type. I was recently watching some trial. I can't remember which one. I've been watching so many. And the attorneys were reading text messages. I think it was probably the Karen Reed trial. They were reading text messages as they were typed and sent, and it was annoying because they left in the typos and they just pronounced everything wrong. But they have to read it as it is. I don't. So, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Beginning on Saturday, January 25th, 2020, at 12:16 p.m., Letecia entered the search, "Find real military singles." At 1:40 p.m., "Parenting should be 4 people, not 1." 50 seconds later, "I'm overdoing all the work for my stepkids and their mom doesn't help." At 1:41 p.m., "Mom advice from stepmom." At 1:48 p.m., "If you aren't involved in your kid's life, you are shitty." At 1:49 p.m., "My husband's ex-wife does nothing for her kids." At 1:51 p.m., "I wonder if my husband's ex-wife is sending me a card since I raise her kids." At both 1:51 and 1:52 p.m., the same term was searched. "I wonder if my husband's ex-wife is sending me a Valentine's Day card since I raise her kids." At 1:54 p.m., this term was also searched twice in very quick succession, so it might have been like a glitchy sort of a thing. It said, "One day, some people will wish they treated you differently." At 3:35 p.m., "Why should my husband choose me over family?" Skipping ahead a few hours, maybe Albert was gone by then, and so she's on the hunt for a new man again. At 7:57 p.m., "Find me a rich guy who wants me to take care of his kids." A minute later, "Find a guy who wants me to take care of his kids and get paid." The next morning was Sunday, January 26, 2020. Letecia started up on Google again at 9:25 a.m. "It's crappy some parents don't care for their kids or buy them presents." At 9:26 a.m., "Parents are those who put their kids before their nails." That one was also searched twice. And those are all the text messages that were listed in the affidavit for the day. It would start up again just after midnight the following day, which would be Monday, the 27th of January. Letecia began tapping around on Google again at 12:09 a.m. on the 28th. She typed in, "My son burned the carpet. How do I fix it?" 39 minutes later at 12:42 a.m., "Smoke effects, will humidifier help?" At 12:43 a.m., "Smoke from fire effects, will humidifier help?" At 12:55 a.m., "Colorado law for kids staying at home." At 1:01 a.m., "Son is sick, but I have to go to work." At 1:03 a.m., "Son's sick, can he stay home?" 3.5 hours later at 4:40 a.m., "Suede repair kit for sofa." There were no other text messages listed for the rest of the day until 6:54 p.m. That is when Letecia searched El Paso Sheriff's Office number. So I don't know if she just didn't Google anything, if she was just busy doing whatever to Gannon, whatever she did to him, whenever she did it. We do know that for 4 of those hours, she left her phone at home when she made those 2 trips to Petco. She purposely left her phone at home because she didn't want her location known. This was the day that Letecia called herself out of work and called Gannon out of school. Then sometime after 10 a.m., I want to say around 10:15, 10:16, she and Gannon were captured on the neighbor's security cameras getting into Albert's Nissan Frontier and making those 2 trips to Petco and wherever else Letecia went. She did not arrive home until 2:20 that afternoon. The cameras captured her again, but not Gannon. However, it is believed that he did arrive home with her, still alive. Letecia had left her phone at home, like I said, and she did conduct Google searches and sent text messages from Gannon's cell phone during that time. It is believed in this time frame that when she returned home from Petco and the time that she begins tapping around on Google again, That is a period when it is believed that Gannon was murdered. Letecia was back on Google at 6:54 p.m. and she searched El Paso Sheriff's Office number, and that will be the last Google search from her phone that was listed in the affidavit on that day that Gannon was killed, January 27th. The next morning, Letecia was back on Google. It is Tuesday, January 28th, 2020, at 4:15 a.m. She typed in, "What is the process for our runaway child?" A minute later, at 4:16 a.m., "Police steps for our runaway." Less than half a second later, "Police steps for our missing child." At 4:36 a.m., "Today's flight OKC to COS," which is Oklahoma City to Colorado Springs. "We know that Albert was getting on the earliest flight home that day from his training in Oklahoma." Several hours later, at 12:57 p.m., Letecia Googled, "Can Nintendo find my Switch?" Several more hours pass when the next text message listed at 4:18 p.m. said that she searched car net Volkswagen. Then a minute later, at 4:19 p.m., Letecia searched, "They are asking for our son's toothbrush but said nothing is wrong." Those were all the Google searches that the affidavit listed in the days surrounding the day Gannon was murdered. I tried Googling some of the things Letecia searched out of curiosity. I didn't get anything that earth-shattering, but I'll tell you what I did search and what I found. I searched meet military singles, and the top result was a website called militarycupid.com. I searched parenting should be 4 people, not 1, and the top results were about the 4 types of parenting styles. I searched I'm overdoing all the work for my stepkids and their mom doesn't help, and the top result was an article on WebMD about 9 step parenting do's and don'ts, and the second result was ways to manage step parenting. I searched mom advice from stepmom, and the top result was a today.com article entitled 17 Things I Wish I Knew Before Becoming a Stepmom. Next, I searched if you aren't involved in your kid's life, you are shitty, and the top result was on a website called aconsciousrethink.com entitled 12 Things Your Parents Did That Left You a Low Confidence Adult. Out of curiosity, I took a quick look at the list, and yeah, my mom was 12 for 12 on this list. And for me and my daughter, well, I wasn't the perfect parent. When it comes to this list, I felt like I'm an 0 for 12. My daughter might feel differently, but maybe I'll ask her when I see her this weekend, if I remember. I searched a couple more. My husband's ex-wife does nothing for her kids. It was a scarymommy.com article entitled "You Can't Co-Parent with the Toxic Ex, so do this instead." I searched find me a rich guy who wants me to take care of his kids, and the top result was an article on WikiHow entitled "How to Find Rich Men." And the last one I bothered searching was what is the process for our runaway child, and the top result took me to the keepyourchildsafe.org website to an article entitled "What do you do if your child runs away?" Getting back to the affidavit, it next goes over the extra periods that Letecia tends to use in her searches instead of a space, and that is one of the patterns that investigators use to identify Letecia's searches in other devices aside from her own cell phone. The affidavit says, "I also direct the court's attention to the way Letecia's search terms are sometimes entered. Letecia hits the period key instead of the space key multiple times while searching the internet in approximately 44% of the searches listed. This will be significant during the discussion of a search conducted on Gannon's phone, as was discussed above and will be further discussed below. There are other searches on Letecia's phone that use a period, and additional search history over a longer time span does exist that is not listed below. Investigators were also able to recover internet search history that was deleted from Letecia's phone. No time and date association was located with the data, and I could only ascertain that the searches were conducted prior to the El Paso County Sheriff's seizing Letecia's phone on January 29, 2020. Some, but not all, of the search history is included below. Some of the other deleted search terms include travel planning, shopping, job searches, and other seemingly innocent activity. I have not purposely left out any particular search that would be exculpatory in nature, and I am not intending to portray that all of Letecia's deleted searches were nefarious in nature. In the affidavit, there are 12 search terms that were deleted but recovered, and they read as follows. Find me a new husband. I feel like I'm just a nanny and not a stepmom. Husband uses me to babysit his kids. Are there any free money to move away from bad situation? My husband never posts about me but does everything else. My husband only cleans up for the army, not me. I'm just a glorified babysitter. Find a new husband. Sent my husband sexual messages and he ignores them. Make my husband want me more. I feel like my husband uses me to babysit his kids. And lastly, find a guy without kids. Next, the affidavit gets into Letecia's consciousness of guilt. During the first 24 to 48 hours surrounding the disappearance of a child, it is reasonable that an assumingly innocent parent, and I'm going to stop here, dreamers, okay? I have to correct this. Assumingly is what's written in the affidavit, and Google Docs is giving it the red squiggle underline. It is not a word. The detective would have been better suited using the word seemingly, so I'll use the correct grammar here. It is reasonable that a seemingly innocent parent or step-parent would be contributing to search efforts and fully participating in the effort to recover the child. In the 24 to 48 hours surrounding Gannon's disappearance, Letecia rented a vehicle, turned her cell phone off for approximately 4 hours on the evening of January 28, 2020, washed her Tiguan immediately prior to coming to the El Paso County Sheriff's Office for an interview, evaded law enforcement's attempts to conduct an in-depth interview, and did not participate in the search for Gannon. On Tuesday, January 28, 2020, between 8:48 a.m. and 8:54 a.m., Letecia instructed Harley to, quote, pull your car in the garage via text message, presumably to temporarily cover up any potential evidence left behind. To be clear, Harley has her own vehicle that was mentioned above, specifically a Volkswagen Jetta. Also on January 28th at approximately 4:04 p.m. to 4:17 p.m., investigators asked Letecia for Gannon's toothbrush to recover his DNA. At or about 4:19 p.m., Letecia did a search in her internet browser of, they are asking for our son's toothbrush, but nothing is wrong. At or about 4:31 p.m. to 4:33 p.m., Letecia has a text conversation with Albert Stauch. The affidavit listed their messages, so I'll read them off to you. Letecia texted, something isn't right. I think they're hiding something. Albert replied, who? The police? Letecia texted, yes, they asked for toothbrushes. Albert replied, what do you think they're hiding? Also on January 28th at or about 10:45 p.m., Letecia made a statement to investigators via text message. At the time of the statement, Gannon had been missing for approximately 27 hours, and Letecia believed that she was a suspect in his disappearance without any prior prompting from law enforcement or notification of such. Her text message said, what do you want from me because I have nothing? One of your very own leaked to me what you guys were doing. I did nothing and/or am being set up. I am not really sure other than being told by another blue with El Paso. I was told I could not go home to sleep. On top of that, men were sent to a home with a minor female and she was forced to stay there, not to even leave for food. Every conversation they said, even at this moment, I can hear inside, what do you want from me? Detective Bethel replied, come in and talk to me. I would just like information to find Gannon. After El Paso County Sheriff's investigators seized Letecia's Volkswagen Tiguan on January 29, 2020, she obtained a 2020 Nissan Altima. Investigators applied for and were granted a search warrant by this court to install a GPS tracker on the vehicle. Investigators monitored this tracking device, which provided particularly useful information on January 31st, 2020. A map with some of this data is included below, and this information will be discussed below and relates to the area north of Palmer Lake along Highway 105 and South Perry Park Road in Douglas County, Colorado. And dreamers, if you recall, this location first came to the attention of investigators because Letecia's Volkswagen Tiguan's GPS led them there first. This is the area where they would subsequently find a piece of particle board stained with Gannon's blood. They found the Nissan Altima Letecia was driving after they seized her Tiguan returned to the same exact area on the 31st, 4 days after Gannon was reported missing. And what I just told you was stated in the affidavit. It says, in summary, investigators believe Letecia utilized the rented Nissan Altima to return to the area in which she disposed of Gannon's body. Indeed, investigators recovered a piece of particle board from this area with Gannon's blood on it. This information will be discussed below in more detail. The fact that Letecia came back to this area on January 31st, 2020 is significant, and investigators have not recovered any evidence that Letecia has family or friends that live in that area or any legitimate reason for her presence in that area other than to dispose of incriminating evidence. I submit, I being Detective Bethel, a reasonable theory for the fact that Letecia returned to this area based on the information presented in this affidavit as follows. Letecia disposed of Gannon's remains at nighttime and likely was nervous about the location that she chose and may not have even remembered exactly where she dumped Gannon's remains. Investigators believe that on January 31st, 2020, she went back to that area to view the area while the sunlight was available, to ensure no evidence was viewable from the road, to ensure his remains were adequately covered to prevent detection, and to see if any law enforcement was in the area. Next, the affidavit discusses the data retrieved from Letecia's Tiguan. Investigators were able to remove a computer chip from Letecia's Volkswagen Tiguan, which was examined by the FBI. The FBI was able to recover data, here and after raw data, which is included but not limited to the estimated location of the vehicle specifically related to the evening of January 28, 2020, and the morning of January 29, 2020. The raw data has not been scientifically evaluated, and the raw data that was provided was not portrayed to be an exact representation of the vehicle's activities. Additionally, I have been told that the raw data has particular limitations, including the inability to show the exact location of the vehicle. For example, if the Tiguan was taken off-road, the raw data may not show that and display the estimated location on the nearest road. Furthermore, the estimated location may have some degree of fluctuation in accuracy, estimated to be approximately 50 to 100 meters, which is about 55 to 110 yards. FBI agents, including Special Agent Donati, took steps to verify and corroborate the data recovered from the Tiguan. In summary, Agent Donati was able to tab some of the raw data, including location and timestamp, and compare it to other evidence. As with other forensic evidence discussed in this affidavit, investigators believe it to be reliable. For example, the Tiguan raw data placed the Tiguan leaving the Colorado Springs Airport just after 7 p.m. on January 28, 2020. This information matched the timestamp of the January 28, 2020 Colorado Springs Airport parking receipt to the Tiguan data. The Tiguan raw data indicated that the Tiguan stopped near a King Soopers parking lot for approximately 10 minutes after leaving the airport, between 10:08 p.m. and 10:18 p.m. Agent Donati was able to review surveillance footage from that King Soopers. And by the way, King Soopers, dreamers, is a grocery store chain located in the Rocky Mountains. Apparently, I hadn't heard of it. But anyway, Agent Donati was able to review the video surveillance footage from that King Soopers, which indeed showed a dark SUV matching the description of the Tiguan sitting in the parking lot during that same time period. Other footage, including video footage from a Wendy's restaurant in a separate location, helped to further corroborate the raw data. Of significant importance, the raw data showed the Tiguan in the area of Highway 105 and South Perry Park Road between 9:15 and 9:30 p.m. on January 28, 2020, and I have included a map depicting that data. The raw data also indicated the Tiguan stopped for approximately 5 minutes in an area proximate to the discovery of Gannon's blood on February 15, 2020. This is the same area Letecia likely drove to in her Nissan Altima rental vehicle on January 31, 2020. The recovery of Gannon's blood is discussed below. Investigators were able to compare Letecia's historical cell site information, including event location system data, against the Tiguan raw data, and found no reason to believe that Letecia was not the driver of the Tiguan on January 28, 2020, which means that's when she dumped Gannon's remains. In between those 5 to 10 minutes or so, she stopped, took the suitcase out, left it there, and that's when his blood seeped onto that particle board. So next, the affidavit goes into a section subtitled The Continued Evolution of Letecia Stories. Investigators conducted several consensually monitored telephone calls with Albert Stauch. Specifically, Albert, at the direction of law enforcement, communicated with Letecia via telephone and email. These communications have been recorded and memorialized and consist of hours of recorded conversation. I will not provide a transcript of these calls, but will summarize the importance of particular changes in Letecia's story and will also include exculpatory information related to Letecia's statements. Letecia never admitted to killing Gannon. Now, Dreamers, there is some audio that I have access to that has all of the recorded telephone calls between Letecia and Albert that were played in court. And I'm not sure if anyone is interested in hearing any of it because most of what she says to Albert are lies, but the audio of her freaking out and screaming and making demands and swearing by any number of stories that she had told up to that point, it does make for a really interesting listen as Letecia continues to try to manipulate Albert, and he tries to go along with her to keep her talking. But at the end of the day, after listening to hours and hours of this woman go on and on and on about everything, she amazingly said absolutely nothing useful or of any type of substance relative to Gannon's whereabouts and where she was, because her whereabouts were a mystery as well. She never gave herself away. The majority of Letecia's whining, crying, screaming, and sniveling is all about herself and only herself. I may upload the audio if there seems to be any interest in it. It won't be, if I put it on Patreon, it'll probably be open to the public because it's because she does so much screaming over the phone, it gets distorted and hard to hear, and you could only take so much of that in your earbuds at once, you know? All right. Anyway, of these recorded calls, the affidavit says, for purposes of refreshing the court, here is a summary of some of Letecia's statements, whether to law enforcement, directly through the media, and or to Albert Stauch in recorded email and voicemail communications. On January 27, 2020, Letecia stated that Gannon left to play at a friend's house and did not come home at 6 p.m. like he was supposed to. On January 29th, Letecia stated that she was held at gunpoint, raped, and Gannon was abducted by her rapist. Within Letecia's falsehoods, there are details corroborated by physical evidence that would be near impossible to know without being intimately involved in the murder. Letecia has made statements to explain blood on the walls in Gannon's bedroom, blood on the rear bumper of the Tiguan, and blood in the garage of the Stauch residence. Details of the location of the blood evidence has not been released to the media, nor to Letecia, and has been closely held throughout this investigation. Furthermore, Letecia has continued to provide alibis for her physical locations, not previously disclosed to investigators. Her statements continue to evolve in a dramatic way and are all remarkably different from the original report to the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. The majority of the conversations between Letecia and Albert begin around February 13th, 2020. Over several days, Letecia's story continued to change. During a phone call on February 13th, 2020, Letecia stated that Gannon was burned by a candle to the point that his skin bubbled and that Gannon peeled the burns off and wiped blood on his bedroom wall. Albert did not ask about blood on the walls of his room during this call. The fact that she provided information about blood on the wall likely indicates her knowledge of the murder scene. On February 14th, 2020, Letecia had an additional conversation with Albert and provided 4 additional versions of Gannon's disappearance. The affidavit then listed the 4 stories in the order that she provided them. Story number 1. When El Paso County Sheriff's deputies came to the house on January 27, 2020, the abductor was still in the residence and that she tried to signal to the deputies that there was somebody in the residence, and it should be noted that El Paso deputies checked the entirety of the house and no additional person was located during that search. Story number 2. Letecia was raped by Quincy Brown at her residence and Brown abducted Gannon. She knew Brown's identity because she saw a paper and his identification card fall out of his pocket that had his name on it. Letecia sent a photograph of Quincy Brown to Albert via text message. It is noted that this photograph mirrored images online wherein Quincy Brown was listed as a most wanted suspect discussed below. Story number 3. Quincy Brown followed her from Petco and at some point was laying in the middle of the road in front of her car. When Letecia stopped to avoid running over the man, he jumped into the car and made her take him home, then raped her. Story number 4. Letecia and Gannon were near County Line Road and Highway 195 in northern El Paso County on January 27, 2020. Gannon was riding a bicycle in that area, fell off and hit his head, and then was abducted by Quincy Brown. In this version of events, Quincy Brown was driven by a man named Terrence. The February 14, 2020 story number 4 has several interesting considerations. During the period of February 12th through the 14th of 2020, it was public knowledge by virtue of media coverage that investigators were searching for Gannon in the area of Highway 105 and South Perry Park Road in southern Douglas County near the El Paso County line. Letecia brought up this location on her own without prompt during a conversation and provided an alibi for why she was in that area. Letecia was adamant that investigators' efforts to search for Gannon in that area would be futile. The area turned out to be significant based on the Tiguan's location on January 28, 2020, and that Gannon's blood was found in this area, discussed below in more detail. Furthermore, as mentioned above, Letecia drove through the same area in her Nissan Altima rented vehicle on January 31st, 2020. I submit that based on raw data retrieved from the Tiguan, Letecia was likely in the area of Highway 105 and South Perry Park Road on the evening of January 28th, 2020, and Gannon's remains were dumped in the vicinity of that area. Letecia's story lays the foundation for a reason why investigators may locate Gannon's body with head trauma. The following details in the affidavit are sexually explicit, and it involves Gannon. However, the story is not true, but it is still difficult to listen to for some. So if you would like to skip, I would say fast forward approximately 40 seconds or so right now. On February 15, 2020, Letecia provided additional conflicting stories to Albert, including the story that she told him about Gannon falling off the bike was a lie because it was what she believed he wanted to hear. Letecia stated the blood in the corner of Gannon's room was a combination of her and Gannon's blood. In this explanation, she stated that the abductor anally penetrated both her and Gannon with an object. Additionally, she was tied up at some point in the abduction, and the abductor was still present during the sheriff's deputy's visit that night. So now the affidavit is going to get into who Quincy Brown is or was. I talked about this previously, that when I looked it up, I found all the results directing me to P. Diddy's one-time stepson, also named Quincy Brown. After that, I just didn't really try to dig any deeper. So luckily for us, the affidavit kind of clears it up a little bit. It says, Quincy Brown, age 37, was listed on El Paso County's most wanted list on February 12, 2020. I was able to locate Brown's photo on KKTV News website, where they described Brown as a black male. It is noted during one of Letecia's stories, she described her rapist as a Hispanic male. The photo on this website appeared to be the same photo Letecia sent to Albert. Quincy Brown has outstanding warrants for failure to register as a sex offender and failure to appear. These warrants appear to have been open since 2018. I was able to find a criminal history for Quincy Brown, date of birth October 21st, 1981, which included but was not limited to a 2001 arrest for first-degree kidnapping in El Paso County Court, which was pled to felony menacing. Investigators have uncovered no evidence to support that Quincy Brown was involved in Gannon's disappearance. The affidavit then jumps back to the blood that was located in Douglas County belonging to Gannon that was on that piece of particle board. As mentioned above, investigators began to focus a search effort for Gannon's remains in the area of Highway 105 and South Perry Park Road on February 12, 2020. There is not an exact address to reference due to the rural nature of the area. This particular location was deemed important based on raw data from the Tiguan on January 28, 2020, and the location data from her rental vehicle on January 31st, 2020. On February 15th, searchers located a piece of particle board during that search. The particle board had a stain that appeared to be consistent with blood. And there is a picture of this particle board, Dreamers, in the affidavit, but it is in black and white in the document viewer, and it's hard to make out anything in it. The affidavit continued, I have added a red circle to indicate the location of the blood stain. The particle board was collected by the FBI response team and transported to the Metro Crime Lab, also on February 15th. An initial test revealed a positive presumptive result for the presence of human blood or high primate. Considering, Dreamers, that there are no primates or high primates that are native to the North American continent that we know of, unless we're talking about Bigfoot, who seems to have quite a following in the state of Colorado, if I remember correctly while I was there. It's like a whole Sasquatch thing. It's most likely that the blood found on that particle board came from a human being. According to the affidavit, further testing of the blood was conducted, and sure enough, a DNA profile was developed, a comparison was made, and yeah, on February 16th, 2020, that profile was not matched to Bigfoot. It came back as a match to Gannon Stauch. The reasonable explanation for the discovery of this particle board with Gannon's blood on it is that Letecia used this particle board during the disposal of Gannon's remains. The area in which the particle board was found is rural, and the ground was covered by approximately 6 to 12 inches of snow. Additionally, as the area is rural in nature, it is likely populated by wildlife, including predators such as bears, coyotes, and mountain lions. Gannon's remains have not been located, and while investigators will continue to search the area, it is possible those remains have since been scattered since January 28, 2020. Now, Dreamers, they're making that assumption at this point, but we know that Letecia, whose desperation to cover up what she did in order to get away with it, actually went back and handled Gannon's remains in order to re-dump him next to that Escambia Bridge out there in Florida. I mean, when you really think about it, it's pretty gruesome. And I would even venture to say that the average person would not be able to stomach or handle the task of moving around, carrying, manipulating, and transporting a dead body halfway across the country. It's actually pretty horrifying when you really think about it. And you know, I don't like to look at any kind of autopsy or violent crime scene photos, but I unfortunately scrolled through an article which had a picture of what appeared to be the medical examiner holding up one of Gannon's hands. And, you know, he was found 50 days after he went missing. And while the picture is a little blurry, it might have been a little bit pixelated, you could see that it was his hand, and it was very dark, like almost black from the advanced stages of decomposition. And I'm getting a little nauseated just thinking about that poor child. But just whatever you do, if you go to the internet, you might run across that photo. It's really the only one that appears in the most top Google results. But anyway, transporting a dead body. Yeah, I couldn't do it, Dreamer. Seriously, I could not handle the grim task of disposing of a body. But Letecia here not only did it once, she did it twice and traveled like about 1,500 miles or so, more than 2,400 kilometers across the country with Gannon's body in the cargo area of her rented moving van. That's like seriously some next level stuff. And it was asked in court, her daughter who traveled with her, how she could not notice the smell or anything weird going on. She did testify at her mom's trial that she didn't really notice anything out of the ordinary. However, she did sorry, I have like the hiccups right now. I don't know what is going on. I could try to hold my breath for a second. Hold on, let me give it a try. Okay, where was I? Harley would go on to testify at her mother's trial that she didn't really notice any smell or anything out of the ordinary as they drove, but she did say that her mom constantly had the air on. Even when it was really cold, her mom just kept it going and kept it going. And she did say on the stand, your mind, your thoughts just don't go there. I'm not sitting here thinking, what's that weird smell? Why is my mom driving with the air on and acting really bizarrely? Oh, it must be because she has a dead body in the back. I mean, nobody thinks that, right? And I mean, Letecia was very good at covering up. She was very good at manipulating people. And who would recognize the smell of a dead body anyway? I mean, the average 17-year-old probably wouldn't. And if Letecia, she could have been using deodorizers and air fresheners, driving with the windows down. And Letecia, like I said, very manipulative. She can fast talk and run around things and beat around the bush like nobody's business. And let's also remember that Harley testified about Letecia's physical abuse. All of these factors, including Harley being afraid or intimidated by her whack-ass mom, that is how much of a garbage person Letecia Stauch was and is. To be able to do what she did and to bring her own teenage daughter along for the ride. Her daughter had been handcuffed at least once as a result of Letecia's actions and behaviors. She came very close to getting charged in this too. Both the girls in the home, Gannon's sisters, Lena and Harley. Yeah, Letecia did that. For real. But anyway. Detective Bethel was putting out her best theory as to what became of Gannon's remains in that first location that Letecia left him in, because that's all she had to work with, are theories. Nobody could have guessed what Letecia would actually go on to do. She assumed Gannon was left there in the open, exposed to the elements and animal activity, but it was much more evil and nefarious than that. Gannon was in that suitcase. His blood seeped out of it onto Letecia's Tiguan, onto the garage of the family home, and onto that piece of particle board. He wasn't scattered, as was suggested in the affidavit, since it was written prior to Gannon's recovery. She didn't have any idea. Anyway, getting back to the affidavit, it says, the map below depicts the area where the particle board was recovered. Compared with the raw data from the Tiguan's location, while idling for approximately 5 minutes on January 28, 2020, and the GPS tracker data from the Nissan Altima on January 31st, 2020. As noted, the raw data of the Tiguan has an estimated 50 to 100 meter variance. So, what does this all mean? Well, the evidence suggests that the evening of Tuesday, January 28, 2020, between 9:15 and 9:30 p.m. that night, approximately 27 hours after Letecia called 911 to report Gannon missing, her Tiguan went to that rural area. She idled there for 5 minutes and then she left. Letecia's Tiguan was seized the following day when she showed up for her interview with El Paso County investigators on Wednesday the 29th. She did wash it right before showing up for that meeting, but she couldn't get rid of everything. Letecia discovered her Tiguan was seized later on that evening after she was transported to the hospital, but ultimately checked herself out. She had Harley take her back to where she parked it, only to find that her Tiguan was gone. From there, Letecia utilized the Nissan Altima her mother and sister rented, and she used that to go back to look for Gannon. And this is based on information from the GPS tracker that law enforcement placed on that rental car. However, I'm not quite sure as to when and how and with what vehicle she picked Gannon's remains back up again. If I find that information or if it becomes more clear, I'll share it with you as we go along here. My best guess was that she used the Altima to go and look for Gannon's remains. I thought maybe she used it to pick him up, but she could have gone there to just make sure she knew where they were because it was rural and you have to know exactly where you went just to make sure that they were still there and to remind herself where to go to retrieve them. And then, as the theory goes, Letecia went back, picked up Gannon's remains, and eventually was seen by her stepbrother loading an awkward and heavy suitcase into a second moving van. If I'm not mistaken, they did do a forensic search of the Nissan, but I don't think they found anything. However, like I said, if I find any other information about how Letecia actually did all that, I will revisit this. Next, the affidavit discusses further monitoring of Letecia's cell phone, GPS pings, and cell site sector information. They monitored her phone and recorded hours of communication between Letecia and others. Some names have been redacted. Each and every communication intercepted is not included within this affidavit. As during other portions of the investigation, Letecia continued to provide different stories to different people about Gannon's disappearance. Letecia provided false information to her sister and other family members. Letecia provided multiple different stories for what happened to Gannon. Several of these stories were discussed above. On February 16, 2020, on a call at or about 7:28 p.m., Letecia told a female believed to be Tila Cummings that she had been giving Albert numerous false stories because she knows he will not believe anything she says. On a February 17, 2020 call at or about 1:53 p.m., Letecia told a female believed to be associated with Laura Abernathy that she was thinking about flying out to Colorado to take a lie detector test to prove her innocence. During that call, she stated, quote, "They think I'm still in Colorado." The affidavit is now going to get into the fake polygraph, which I talked about previously, but the affidavit has a little bit more information about it, so I'll share it with you. On another February 17th call at or about 4:11 p.m., Letecia told an unknown female that she was going to take a lie detector test, but that the test is not admissible in court and no law enforcement would be present. Next, the affidavit discusses the fake polygraph that I went over before. It turns out it was through the monitoring of Letecia's calls that investigators found out about that fakepolygraph.com website that we looked up. On a February 18th, 2020 call at or about 10:14 a.m., Letecia called the phone number, and they listed the number in the affidavit, but I'm not going to read it out to you. Detective Bethel wrote, "I conducted research on that phone number and learned that it was associated with fakepolygraph.com. During that call, Letecia stated she never got a confirmation for a test she paid for. Letecia provided the spelling of her name, and before disconnecting the call, the unknown male stated he would resend the results to her email." In the affidavit, there's a screen grab of the website, which I also shared with you previously. On February 18th, 2020, so the next day, Letecia called the fakepolygraph.com number again. During this call, Letecia inquired about an email she received. The unknown male stated that her report was blocked by management based on the content of the questions and stated that with any illegal activities, they reserve the right to not send the report. Letecia's response was the following. She said, "So what do you do now? Just delete it and go on about life and keep the money?" The unknown male representative at fakepolygraph.com replied, "Yes, we do indeed." Letecia replied, "Okay, gotcha, thank you, goodbye." Investigators contacted Luke Devlin using the same phone number that Letecia called. Mr. Devlin provided information to investigators, including the questions and answers that Letecia had provided. Letecia provided the following questions and answers that were supposed to be truthful to fakepolygraph.com. And ooh, dreamers, this is pretty good stuff, pretty incriminating, pretty damning, and pretty stupid. Letecia's questions and answers for fakepolygraph.com were as follows. 1. Do you intend to answer these questions regarding your stepson truthfully? Yes. Is your birthday August 4th, 1983? Yes. Did you participate in any way in causing harm to your stepson? No. Did your stepson return with you to your home? Yes. Did you participate in any way in causing the death of your stepson? No. I submit to the court that if Letecia had nothing to hide, she would not have to pay for a fake polygraph result. And I submit, dreamers, I being yours truly, I submit the fact that one of the questions Letecia provided to fakepolygraph.com was whether she participated in causing the death of her stepson. This further demonstrates Letecia's consciousness of guilt. Even though nobody knows that Gannon is dead yet except for her, they haven't yet found his remains, things are still kind of hopeful. At least people were remaining hopeful that Gannon would be found alive, though it wasn't likely to most people involved in this case. They still held out the hope. But to me, Letecia even listing that question on the fake polygraph a month before Gannon was even found is hugely suspect. The affidavit finally gets into the in conclusion section. Based on the data collected by the FBI and reported in the Journal of Forensic Sciences, I have learned that in over 71% of homicide cases that involve false reporting, the reporting party is responsible for the murder. To be clear, this statistic is not being provided as the sole probable cause for the requested warrant, but as an additional fact to be combined with others in this affidavit. Based on Letecia's internet history, it is reasonable to believe that she was unhappily married to Albert Stauch and had some degree of resentment towards the family as a step-parent. Furthermore, days before Gannon's murder, Letecia appeared to be researching a move to another state to a 2-bedroom apartment. Letecia has not provided a fully truthful statement to investigators at any point during this investigation, particularly regarding the circumstances of Gannon's disappearance. This would reasonably be the suspected activity of an individual that committed the crime under investigation, namely murder. Within approximately 24 hours of Gannon being reported missing, and without external prompt, Letecia made claims to law enforcement that she was being set up. Initially, Letecia said Gannon was playing with a neighbor friend between approximately 3:15 and 4 p.m. and was expected to be home at 6 p.m. Within a few days, Letecia changed her story to label herself as a victim of rape, felony menacing with a weapon, and assault, resulting in Gannon's abduction by her rapist. Her stories continued to evolve to include a new location of Gannon's disappearance over 30 miles away, several completely different sets of circumstances, and unprompted explanations for why Gannon's blood would be found by investigators in key locations. Letecia was unable to provide a logical reason why she rented another vehicle while she still had access to the Tiguan. Based on the aforementioned facts, it was likely because it contained the remains of, or evidence of Gannon's remains, based on positive reactions to luminol in the Tiguan on the bumper indicating the likely presence of blood on the rear tailgate. A suspected blood sample from the interior of the trunk area returned a negative result for the presumptive presence of blood. Gannon's mattress has a large red stain that is consistent with blood. Based on the orientation of the mattress in the room, it appears that this is where Gannon's head and upper torso would have been. Below that same area, a substance that was confirmed as blood by the Metro Crime Lab soaked through the carpet, the pad, and stained the concrete. This blood matches the DNA profile for Gannon Stauch. In the same area, blood samples taken from the wall, namely an electrical outlet, were also confirmed to match Gannon's DNA profile. Gannon's blood again matched to his DNA profile and was also found on a piece of particle board in the area of Highway 105 and South Perry Park Road in Douglas County, Colorado. This particular area is consistent with Letecia's travels on January 28, 2020 and January 31, 2020 on GPS tracker locations of her Nissan Altima and the raw data from her VW Tiguan. During her stories to Albert Stauch, without prompting, Letecia provided explanations for why blood would be found on Gannon's bedroom wall. Other than Letecia being present for Gannon's murder and being present for the cleaning of the murder scene, there is no reasonable explanation for how Letecia would know that there was blood on Gannon's wall, as that evidence had not been released to the media. Again, without prompt, Letecia provided an alibi for why she was in the area where the particle board was recovered. By combining cell tower data, reviewing video surveillance, and home security system logs, investigators believe, based on the evidence, the only 3 individuals with access to Gannon on the afternoon of January 27, 2020 were Letecia, Harley, and 8-year-old Lena. With the exception of Lena, who was not considered a suspect, it appears nobody other than Letecia was with Gannon at the Stauch residence between the hours of approximately 2:16 p.m. and 4:34 p.m. on Monday, January 27, 2020, when investigators suspect Letecia murdered Gannon. So that's the key time period. On that Monday, the 27th, they pulled into the driveway in Albert's Nissan Frontier at 2:16 p.m. She went into the house, and the ADT security system picked up a whole bunch of activity. We talked about the average number of doors opening and closing, going to and from the basement, up and down the stairs, doing whatever she was doing, was far higher than all of the other average days surrounding or leading up to the day of the murder. There's a little bit of discrepancy about the time that Lena arrived home from school. There was one part in the affidavit or in the conclusion where it said she had come home around 1 o'clock, but I do believe it was after 3 o'clock when the bus came. She's shown on the security video. So Letecia had close to an hour to murder Gannon, and she got interrupted by Lena coming home from school, and then she sent her out to go riding on her bike, which was also captured on outdoor surveillance cameras. And then Harley was making her way home from work, and that's when Letecia sent her text messages and told her to go to the dollar store and to take Lena with her to buy those products to do the cleanup. And from there, it would be another couple hours, like sometime between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m., that Letecia made the phone call to report Gannon missing. So it's likely that Gannon was killed within the hours of 2:16 and 4 p.m. And that really hadn't been clear to me at all up until we got to the end of this story. I had no idea when Gannon was killed, nor did I have any idea when he was dumped, and I still have no idea when he was picked up for the first time, and we're not even really sure when he was dumped the second time. The affidavit continued, and remember, this was written at the end of February, on or about February 28th. It says Gannon has been missing for approximately 4 weeks, and there has been national news attention on major networks related to his disappearance. Local efforts, including posters, news coverage, search teams, and social media postings, have also failed to locate Gannon. Aerial assets, infrared, FLIR technology, and other extraordinary methods have been deployed to help locate Gannon. Over 200 volunteers have helped the search for Gannon. And speaking of which, one of the things that happened during the sentencing phase of Letecia's trial, and maybe I'll play this audio for you too, they played some some critical moments, some key moments from the impact statements that the family gave. And of course, Gannon's biological mother and father spoke. Some of his extended family members on Albert's side of the family also spoke of the impact of his death. One of the ones that was really moving actually came from a neighbor, and she spoke about how Gannon being missing for 5 weeks or so, how that really instilled a great deal of fear within the community and how they were afraid to let their kids go outside to play. And she spoke of the impact that the news coverage and what had happened to Gannon had on the community as a whole. And I thought that was a really interesting perspective. So maybe I will go ahead and bring out that audio for you. The affidavit continued, based on the facts set forth above, I submit probable cause exists to believe that on or about January 27, 2020, within the state of Colorado and within El Paso County, Letecia Stauch committed the offenses in violation of Colorado revised statutes to include murder in the first degree of a child under the age of 12, in a position of trust, child abuse resulting in death, tampering with the deceased human body, and tampering with physical evidence. Therefore, your affiant respectfully requests the issuance of an arrest warrant charging the same. So let's talk about how this all came to an end. On March 2nd, 2020, 3 days after that a warrant was signed, Letecia was arrested in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and charged with first-degree murder of a child by a person in a position of trust, child abuse resulting in death, tampering with a deceased human body, and tampering with physical evidence. Letecia was extradited back to El Paso County, Colorado, and held without bail at the county jail. Letecia Stauch murdered Gannon in his bedroom on the day that she reported him missing. Letecia stabbed Gannon 18 times. He was struck in the head at least once with an object, and Letecia shot him once with a handgun. Letecia cleaned up the crime scene of the murder and disposed of Gannon's remains in a suitcase that belonged to her. Letecia would then go on to lie to everyone. She lied to investigators about her whereabouts and activities in the days following Gannon's disappearance. She claimed that Gannon was sick and stayed home from school that day and drove to various places with him over the course of the day. Camera footage from a neighbor's house showed that Letecia and Gannon left the house in Albert's Nissan Frontier around 10:15 a.m. and returned home around 2:20 p.m. It is believed after that time, and likely before Lena got home from school that day after 3 p.m., that Letecia murdered Gannon on his bed in his bedroom by hitting him in the head, stabbing him 18 times, and shooting him once in the head, specifically through the jaw, the bullet severing his spine. It is believed that Gannon was most likely in the trunk of the Tiguan in that suitcase at the time she called to report him missing, and then Letecia dumped Gannon's remains at the initial site the next night. Sometime afterwards, Letecia went back, picked up the suitcase with Gannon's remains inside, and ultimately traveled from Colorado to Florida, where she left his remains next to the Escambia Bridge near Pensacola, Florida. It is strongly believed that she threw him over the side of the bridge. And from there, Letecia returned to her home state of South Carolina, where she remained until her arrest March 2nd, 2020. And 15 days later, on March 17th, Gannon was finally found by those bridge inspection officials. After denying having nothing to do with Gannon's murder and in the face of overwhelming evidence tying her to his death, Letecia ended up changing her plea to not guilty by reason of insanity. In other words, Letecia admitted that she did it, but was mentally ill or suffering some kind of mental episode. Letecia also claimed that she suffered from dissociative identity disorder stemming from childhood sexual abuse. She was deemed competent to stand trial, which she did for 5 weeks beginning May 8, 2023. The prosecution witnesses included Albert, Landon, Harley, and an array of former employers, family members, investigators, forensic analysts, and mental health experts. The only witness the defense called was Dorothy Ottnow-Lewis, an expert witness in the field of psychiatry with a specialization in dissociative identity disorder. And dreamers, full disclosure, I didn't really want to get too deep into who this expert witness was, so I just took a quick peek at Dorothy Ottnow-Lewis's Wikipedia page. It talks about her research when it comes to inmates who had been abused as children or saw or witnessed traumatic or violent events to reach conclusions about dissociative identity disorder and the link to childhood abuse and trauma. However, her research has been criticized for her small samples without using a control group, as other experts have found a much lower estimate of convicted murderers who were actually abused as children. Her conclusions that there are several antecedents of violence leads to brain damage, which increases emotional lability, impulsiveness, and poor judgment. Most are not violent, but when you put together this brain dysfunction, a tendency to paranoia, and early ongoing abuse and violence, you get a recipe for violence. She assessed or testified in a number of high-profile cases, including Mark David Chapman, the man who murdered John Lennon, serial killers Joel Rifkin, Joseph Paul Franklin, Ted Bundy, and Arthur Shawcross, as well as the Beltway snipers case, the stepfather and son who did the shootings, the random shootings in the Washington, D.C. area at the turn of the millennium. She assessed or testified in that case as well. It has been said that her testimony in Letecia's trial benefited the prosecution more so than it did the defense, and Letecia was found guilty on all charges. She was actually admonished by the judge, Gregory Werner. I was going to tell you what he said, but I'll just go ahead and let him tell you himself because he really does sum it up better than I could.
A parent's worst nightmare is getting a phone call letting them know that something has happened to their child. How much worse must that nightmare be when law enforcement asks not for a picture of your loved one, but rather DNA and dental records? I've also heard it said that one of the worst tragedies a parent can experience is to outlive a child. I have known people, both professionally and personally, who have gone through that. It never leaves them, but the sharpness of the pain does diminish to some extent over time. I cannot fathom the pain Mr. Stauch and Ms. Bullard have experienced as a result of the defendant's actions. A sentence in a criminal case such as this will not change the fact that their son's life was taken from them, and no sentence I impose and nothing I say will ever change that fact. Ms. Stauch, you betrayed the person you loved enough to marry. You told your husband lies and took away someone he loved. You took away every day that Mr. Stauch or Ms. Bullard could have had with their son. When you take a life, regardless of how you do that, you forever alter the future. Neither Mr. Stauch nor Ms. Bullard will ever see their son graduate from high school, go through the joy and the pain of that first love, or get married. They will never know what kind of impact their son may have had on the world if only he had lived to become an adult. And had Gannon's body not been found, they never would have known what happened to Gannon. They would always have had a lingering doubt about what happened to Gannon. And I cannot imagine the pain and sense of loss associated with that. You betrayed your daughter, Harley Hunt. I cannot imagine the emotional impact that you have had on her due to your selfish and calculated actions. This is a young woman that trusted you to put her interests above yours. This is a young woman who believed in you and believed you were innocent of this crime right up until the time that you pled not guilty by reason of insanity. And she still loves you. That's natural for a child, and it doesn't matter how much older they get. You were supposed to protect her. I cannot imagine the guilt she feels or the therapy that she will need to address your betrayal. There is no evidence that she had anything to do with the murder or your cover-up of it, but some people still think that she is somehow involved. She wasn't. The incredible strength of will and courage that it took for her to come in and testify is amazing to me. But she did it because, as she said, it was the right thing to do. And while thankfully she didn't testify, let's not forget about Lena. You betrayed her too. You took her brother from her and forever altered her family dynamics. She will always wonder who she can trust and will always feel that loss. She was there the day you killed Gannon. His body was still in the house when she got back from school. At some point, you even claimed this 8-year-old girl helped you move her brother's body from the basement to the back of your car. That's just simply not true. As she gets older, Lena is going to want to know more, and she's going to want to know if there was something that she could have done to prevent this. I hope she comes to realize that she has no fault in all of this. You betrayed your stepson, and you took his life. You took away everything he was and everything he could ever become. I can't imagine the terror and confusion that he must have felt in the last moments of his life when he knew his life was being taken by someone he trusted to protect it. Your attempt to raise the claim that you did this because of your adverse childhood is also a betrayal of people that have mental health issues. It is no secret that there is a large part of our population that has mental health issues. It's also no secret that our country and our health system could do a much better job addressing mental health issues than it does. However, the number of people with mental health issues who become violent is small, and the number who become murderers is smaller still. Your claim that a mental health issue caused the murder in this case is a disservice to all those who struggle with mental health issues every day. This isn't the first case I have presided over in which sanity or a mental condition of the defendant has been raised as a defense. I have had cases where the defendant's mental condition caused the defendant to act out in a certain fashion. But even in those cases, I have never seen conduct like this. I understand the claim of dissociative identity disorder. I have seen something resembling that, and I have seen defendants with schizophrenic disorders. I can understand those. What I have seen is that the mental condition causes the person to act a certain way, and when they realize what they did, they are astonished by what happened, or they have no memory of what happened. Your claim is that it was another personality that murdered Gannon, but there is no time during the minutes, hours, and days following the murder where Letecia came out and wondered, gee, why am I carrying a body around in my luggage? That just isn't credible. You knew what you were doing. You made a number of clear and conscious decisions to cover or disguise what you had done. Claiming a lack of motive is a common defense tactic, and it can be a sound strategy. The truth is, however, that it only takes a moment to make a bad decision that results in disastrous consequences. And oftentimes, we never know why a defendant chose a particular course of action. However, that does not mean that they did not intend to undertake a course of action. Sometimes, as in this case, the likely explanation is anger. An 11-year-old boy with burns who feels that he's not being taken care of. An 11-year-old boy on the verge of being a teenager. Those of us who have lived through people or kids that were teenagers, we know how that is. It is not hard to imagine Gannon saying something, "You're not my mom. I want my mom. I want my dad." And that would be enough to make you really angry. But anger is not an excuse. A defendant is responsible for the choices they made and the actions they undertook, even though those choices arose out of or were motivated by anger. It's clear that you hated and were jealous of Landon Bullard. You saw yourself as a better mother than she was. It's clear from the evidence that you had some resentment from being left with Mr. Stauch's children. It's clear you had some resentment toward Mr. Stauch because he traveled as part of his job. Some of that manifested as early as Al's assignment in Alaska when you made allegations against the people in his unit. That caused Al to have to return from Alaska. And in one of the phone calls that were played for the jury, you talked about having to take care of his kids while he was away and what a good mother you were. It's clear you felt trapped. You wanted out. You were searching for a new job and a new location in Florida. Mr. Stauch had been gone on his new assignment for less than 2 days when the fire in the basement occurred. I can imagine that you saw your whole future consisting of taking care of Mr. Stauch's children while he was off doing his thing, and that's not the future that you wanted. I can imagine Gannon, at some point after he sustained his burns, telling you wanted his real mom and how that comment would have made you angry. You took your frustration and anger for the marriage, the child care, the absence of Al, and even living in Colorado. You took all of that out on Gannon. The evidence suggests you first stabbed Gannon repeatedly, 18 times. Based on the number of defensive wounds, he was clearly conscious for some of that. He was certainly gravely wounded. And chillingly, it would also explain how you were able to mimic the sound of Gannon breathing in one of your sessions with Dr. Lewis. Those were probably close to his last breaths. He was dying but not dead. The evidence could also lead one to conclude that he either fell or rolled off the bed where you shot him in the head and then beat him with the butt of a gun or a baseball bat. That would explain the blood found at different levels on the walls in Gannon's bedroom. I'm also reminded of the look you had on your face when you slipped your handcuffs while being transported back to Colorado and attacked Deputy James. I shudder to think that that was probably the last thing that Gannon saw before he died. You have shown no remorse throughout this process. Instead, you've made a choice to build a web of lies. When you gave an interview to Detective Jessica Bethel on January 29 of 2020, you lied to her about Gannon running away and that he was actually taken by a guy named Eduardo. When you explained that to Detective Bethel, you said you needed to lie because you didn't want to face the consequences. You told her that you were trying to come up with a plan about what you should do. And finally, you told her you really thought you could fix this. I think that's true. You lied because you didn't want to face the consequences. You needed to come up with a plan to fix this, and that plan involved covering up what you had done. It involved lie upon lie. But you slipped up at various points and let kernels of truth escape. In one conversation with Mr. Stauch, You told him the FBI needed to close the borders of Colorado, needed to close I-95. I-95 doesn't go through Colorado. It's an interstate that runs along the entire eastern seaboard. It's also not far from where you dumped Gannon's body. When questioned by Detective Bethel, you told her that Mr. Stauch might also make up some kind of story about you coming at him with a knife. You said you would never use a knife like that. Yet Gannon was stabbed 18 times. Your actions in this case also show a very conscious attempt to avoid responsibility in this case. You started out with the story that Gannon had run away. You gave some hints that it might be related to bath salts or drug use by Gannon. You stayed with that story until you were called into EPSO for an interview. You knew they weren't going to buy the story that Gannon ran away. Then you came up with the abduction. And you stayed with some iteration of that for a long time. But all of those versions had one thing in common. You were always the victim. In one, you're beaten and raped and Gannon was abducted. In one, someone stole Gannon out of a truck in the parking lot. In another, you let someone drive Gannon to a hospital to take care of a head injury that he had after falling off a bike. In all of them, you could claim it wasn't your fault. You were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Then you got arrested. You stuck to the story that it was someone else that took Gannon. During the hours that you spoke with Special Agent Grusing, he told you he thought sometimes good people do bad things and sometimes it's an accident. Then they found Gannon's body. Then you saw the mountain of evidence against you. And this is a mountain the size of Everest. What was your position after that? Well, it was an accident. And you, Letecia, didn't even do it. It was Maria Sanchez. You carefully crafted your new story to continue to avoid responsibility. It also allowed you to take advantage of the out that Mr. Grusing and Mr. Stauch suggested much, much earlier when they asked you if this was an accident. Now it was an accident. Your Maria Sanchez personality shot Gannon by mistake because she thought he was an intruder in a cape. Multiple personalities is not credible in this setting, as regardless of how many personalities you have, you only have one body. I have presided over cases where a mental disease or defect prevented a defendant from remembering the course of events, including the commission of the crime. Without exception, those defendants have been terrified when contacted by law enforcement because there was a period of time in their lives that they could not account for. Their body may have sustained an injury, and they don't know how it happened. They may have some new object in their house or on their person, and they have no idea where they got it from. We all have free will, and we all make choices based on that free will. The people who suffer from the mental disorder you claim are terrified because their free will has been taken from them and they are being subjected to things and experiences they don't understand and don't have any recollection of. You didn't behave anything like that. One of the purposes is to impose an appropriate sentence for the criminal conduct that occurred. Another purpose is to punish an offender by imposing a sentence that takes into account the seriousness of the offense. Yet another purpose of sentencing is to prevent crime and promote respect for the law by providing an effective deterrent to others likely to commit a similar offense. Anyone who's been in my courtroom before knows that I've said sentencings are the most difficult thing that I do. That's especially true in cases where someone has lost his or her life. Nothing I or the law can do will ever bring that person back. I have handled hundreds, if not thousands, of criminal cases over the years. I think at this point in my career, I've presided over something like 200 jury trials. I've sentenced hundreds more defendants pursuant to plea agreements. This is not the first murder case that has come before me. This is not the first case I have presided over which involves harm to a child. This is not the first case I have had where a person who was in an unhappy marriage committed a crime. Sadly, statistically, there is a high correlation between violent acts, including murders, and family members. I have had a number of cases which have demonstrated one person's capacity for cruelty toward another human being. I can, however, say without hesitation that the facts in this case are the most horrific I have ever seen. Your conduct in this case deserves the maximum punishment that I can impose under Colorado law. As such, with respect to the charge of first-degree murder after deliberation, I remand you to the custody of the Colorado Department of Corrections for the remainder of your life with no possibility of parole. With respect to the charge of murder in the first degree of a child under 12 by a person in a position of trust, I remand you to the custody of the Colorado Department of Corrections for the remainder of your life with no possibility of parole. Those two sentences will merge. If you have questions about that, you can ask your attorneys. With respect to the charge of tampering with a deceased human body, I'm also going to sentence you to 12 years, followed by a 3-year period of parole. That sentence is to be consecutive to the life sentences that I've already imposed. With respect to tampering with physical evidence, I'm going to impose an 18-month sentence. That sentence is also consecutive to the to the sentences for the murder charges that I have imposed. I also understand, with the consent of the prosecution, and I'm assuming no objection from the defense, that I will dismiss all the charges in 20 CR 3170, close that out, subject to restitution, give the people 49 days for restitution, 14 days for response, and if there's an issue, we will set it within the 90 days. I think that resolves all outstanding matters. Is there anything else that the prosecution wishes for me to address?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Defense?
Yes.
Court will be in recess.
And that, Dreamers, was the tale of a twisted stepmother, the murder of Gannon Stauch. Okay, so I have one more thing I need to do on Patreon related to the Seth Jackson case. And then I'm going to put up some more audio and analysis of Letecia Stauch and her interview and interrogations. I want to thank you all so much for listening to this series. This has been one of my favorite stories to cover. I enjoyed this case a lot because it came to such a satisfying end, except for the fact that, like the judge said, nothing can ever bring him back and the future is forever changed. I'll be back soon on Patreon, like I said, with some content for you over there related to this case after the Seth Jackson case. And I'll be back on here in a couple of weeks with a brand new story. I don't know if it's going to be a one and done. I don't know if it's going to be a multi-part series. Likely, I'm going to try to go for the one and done episodes. Those tend to be a little bit longer than an hour. And that's all I have for now. However, I am going to leave you with the victim impact statement from Letecia's trial. If you want to stick around and listen to that, I'm going to play that all the way out. All right. That's all I've got for today. I want to thank you again for taking the time to listen to the podcast. Don't forget, leave a rating and a review. And as always, take care, be safe, and sweet dreams. And stay on if you want to hear the impact statements.
The first person that would like to make a statement to the court is Nicole.
All right.
And I'll have each person spell a name for the court report.
Yes. All right. Just step up to the podium there and just state your name and then tell me what you have to tell me.
Nicole Mobley, Nicole Mobley. I just want to initially thank you for everything that you've done through all of this, as well as the prosecution. This has been well over 3 years of a family, as well as hundreds or thousands of us who have gone through a lot. It's been hard. It's been heartbreaking. And to finally see some kind of justice, especially for his family, is incredible. And I just want to thank everybody for everything that you guys have done.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hello, Your Honor. My name is Janie Cadenas,
All right. Can you spell that last name?
Cadenas.
Okay, go ahead.
Also, like what Nicole said, wanted to thank you for making this such a fair and neutral trial through the process. I am here today as I have sat with the family for the last 3 years as a community member in Lorson Ranch who has watched the turmoil that this has caused everybody in our community. 3 years ago, we heard as a neighborhood what happened, that a little boy went missing, and we rallied together in a way that most communities can never experience or imagine. We came together and we helped find ways to get media involved, to get search parties involved, to do everything we could to be of assistance to find this little boy, because Gannon wasn't just a neighbor, he was all of our little boys. For months and months until he was found, we were all scared to let our kids go outside because we were scared that they would be kidnapped. We didn't know what was going to happen. And through that process, we all came together and we met Landon and Al, those of us that didn't know them, and we built relationships and friendships and garnered a family relationship with them through that process. But this is just one thing that, as a community member, somebody who was a part of it from the beginning, that I can confidently say, this is the worst tragedy that anybody could ever go through and every parent's nightmare. And I have watched and held Landon as she falls apart time after time. But we are here today and justice has finally been served for Gannon. And we want to thank you as a community for that opportunity for this to happen today.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Jeff Davenport, Jeffdavenport.
All right.
I am Gannon's great uncle. I'm Albert's uncle, and my sister Debbie, who hopefully will be speaking in a few minutes, is his grandmother. Because I am a couple of steps away from him in relation, even though I have personal memories of Gannon and the loving, wonderful young man that he was and the great man he would have been. I want to leave the depth of impact to his parents. So I would like to talk about the breadth of impact. The preciousness of an 11-year-old's life is beyond measure, and all other impacts to all the rest of us pale in comparison to the loss he suffered himself. But this now convicted murderer did not just murder Gannon. She murdered all of the love and joy and encouragement and security he would have brought to all those he encountered throughout his life. She murdered his children and his grandchildren and all of the joy and love and encouragement and security they would have brought to all those they encountered throughout their life, and so on and so on. She murdered his junior prom, his senior prom, his high school graduation, his college years, his career, his marriage, his retirement, and his golden years. And it just goes on and on. Because of her crime, all of our fragile trust in one another has been further eroded. It's not an exaggeration to say that millions of people throughout the world have heard of this crime and will, as a consequence, be less trusting and more suspicious of those in whose care they entrust their children, even those who have loved and cared for their children for years. And because of her specious, cynical, calculated use of the NGRI defense in this case, those who are truly mentally ill will be treated with more suspicion and may not receive the help that they need. The reverberations of her murder of Gannon will ripple throughout eternity, and the impact of her crime is truly incalculable. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Judge. Veronica Birkenstock, spelled Veronicia. Birkenstock, Birkenstock. I am Landon's Aunt Veronica, or Aunt V, and his great aunt. Nothing in life prepares you for the murder of a child. No one ever thinks this can happen to your family. A little over 3.5 years ago, I got a call, a very dreaded call, that I needed to come and be with Landon. For over 3 years, I have dear left her side in all the hearings, all the motions, and all the hearings that the defendant decided not to come to because she didn't think it was important. But regardless, we showed up, and we showed up for Gannon. I want to talk about forgiveness today because as a Christian, I have to forgive, not because I want to, because human flesh does not want to. The judge today, on behalf of Landon and I, we want this court to know that we have forgiven Letecia for what she did. God is the ultimate judger. But I pray today that your judge will give her what she deserves on this earth and will let God do the rest in eternity. I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but I would like to leave this Bible. And at some point in time, if you think it's okay, to give to Letecia as she serves her life sentence. And we hope that will be the punishment that you render shortly. But this is a life application Bible. For the rest of her natural life, I hope she will read the Word of God. And I hope that she will turn from her evil ways and the things that she did to our family. I have sat here for 6 weeks, and I have listened to the horrendous things that she did to my nephew. I don't want the last memory of him to be what she did to him. Our last memory of Gannon was one of fun, love, joy, so articulate, and despite everything, he was gifted and intelligent. He wasn't supposed to live. The day he was born, the doctors told us he had really no chance. He weighed 1 pound and a few ounces. I'll never forget the picture that Albert sent when he took his wedding ring and it would fit all the way to his shoulder. For months, I saw Landon and Albert pray over their baby. And one of the happiest days was the day he got to come home. And I was there with them. I got to spend the first night holding him for the first time and looked in his beautiful little eyes, and he fought so hard to get there. His 11 years did have impact. And I want us to remember again, and it's who he was, not what this evil deed did to his memory. He is our hero and will always be our hero. Letecia tried to steal many things from my niece. She called her a drug addict. She called her homeless when she was in the hospital having her 3rd child. She was there for months and months trying to save her life and her baby. She wasn't homeless. Landon's a good mother. She loved her children. And she loved Gannon. And her only son was taken away by someone who was just ferociously jealous of my niece. With all that being said, I pray that you will give her the sentence that she deserves. But I also pray that God will forgive her if she repents and turns from her evil ways.
All right. Thank you.
My name is Bob Rogers, B-O-B, R-O-G-E-R-S. My wife Patty and I are grandparents to Lena and Gannon, who we never had the opportunity to meet in person. Over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of tears and challenges with Al, of who hopefully helped him walk through this tragedy. The person that comes to mind for me is Lena. Lena is Gannon's younger sister. And we have the opportunity to be grandparents to her. And she's a beautiful child. She sings beautifully. She's talented. What she doesn't have is an older brother to stand beside her as she goes through her life. She still mentions Gannon quite often, her brother. We never want the spirit of Gannon or the memory of Gannon to be lost. So I just am a loss for words. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
I am Deborah Pierce, Pearce. Sorry. Gannon's grandmother. And I just wanted to thank you, first of all, Your Honor, for this court and everything that's been done, for everyone who has so carefully and impartially cared for this case, for this loss of this precious child. And I feel that if Gannon were here today, he would say, please, please protect my family and be concerned for the loss that they've had. This has gone from my children to my grandchildren, little children who lost a cousin who never understood why something like this could happen. If he were here today, he would say, please take care of my family. Make sure that they're protected as time goes on and as this life goes on. And obviously, to help us to go forward in this life. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, Your Honor. My name is Landon Bullard, also referred to as Hyatt in this case, but Bullard's Bullard. I miss you, Gannon, and I love you to the moon and back again. I know every day you're with me and your sisters, but that will never be taken away. The ache that I have for you, to hold you, to hug you, to tell you how much I love you, and to see your smile and your innocence. I remember all the pain your dad and I suffered with having children. It was never easy, and we were always fearful through the process. On September the 29th, 2008, our lives were forever changed. Our first biggest blessing came into the world, weighing only 1 pound and 6 ounces. You fought all the odds and developed a personality and a smile that's larger than life. You became my hero that day. You forever changed my heart and my life, and that will never change. That is something that can never be taken away from me. You came into this world fighting. And unfortunately, you left this world fighting. Your Honor, she fought against someone that he loved and trusted. Someone that myself and Albert both trusted and loved. Someone who can never understand what it means to love or trust anyone but herself. For more than 3 agonizing years, I've often wondered what I may say, or if I would even be able to. For 3 years, I have questioned every single possibility and scenario. For 3 years, I have tried to forgive you, but I can't. I want to. But no parent should have to bury their child. No parent should have to see or hear the horrific things you have done to the whole family. She has taken away the most precious gift in this world. Not just my family, not Al's family, but your own family. She destroyed dozens of lives of people who never wanted to believe that she could have done this. She knew how special Gannon was, and she knew what meant to most to me. I, in my heart, can never understand her hatred and insecurities. When it came to me, I did love her. Mother to mother, I trusted her with my children while trying to survive a complicated life with my 3rd child. And she used every opportunity to write a narrative of my life to try to take pieces of my life. When she already took some of it, that still wasn't enough. She searched. I lost my place. I don't know where I'm at now. She searched so hard for love when all along she had it, but she took it for granted. I didn't hold anger against you then. I still kept my heart open to her. You had so much love from Lena and Gannon, from Harley, her own daughter, that you willingly subjected to the chance of serving time for her crimes. Such an indicator of her inability to love anyone herself. You had support, appreciation for me, even when we couldn't see eye to eye, because I valued her for helping me with our children when I physically couldn't. Even when I was fighting for my kids, as you wrote, a false smear campaign against me and my children, and also Al. For me, I still appreciated that they were loved by you. So I thought. She had everyone fooled. She projected abuse and addiction claims against all of us, not just me, when all along she was the one harming innocent children. Anything to take the light off, manipulating us, breaking my kids, and murdering my son. I can't say that she ruined my life, because that will be some form of sick victory for her. Because even through this process, it's been a game to her. The people who listened doesn't know her style or her sly jabs. She's even made at Albert and I. They do not know the significance of certain things she says or does. But we do. Instead of allowing her to take that power of hurting me further, I wanted to tell you this. Let me tell you what Gannon has done. Even to this day, even after you murdered him and she tried to taint any positive image of him, he has caused families and communities to come together. Children and adults have given their life to Christ. He has called unity in times of trial. He is a hero. She even tried to steal that away. A cape, huh? The one image of Gannon that was created for the world. After it went national, TV begging for the return of my son, my hero. How dare her? How truly sick and cruel is she? You stole so much from this world. Gannon's cousins, aunts, uncles, sisters, new siblings, grandparents, and friends are missing a huge portion of their lives without Gannon. Lena is missing her brother. Your Honor, I've never seen a bond between two siblings so close as theirs. She had to take that. Why? I'm afraid we may never know that answer, will we? I show his baby sister, Nova, pictures and videos of Gannon so she will always remember who he is, because she stole him from us. He is not forgotten and never will be. And it's so sad to sit here today and face her, a person even Gannon loved, one that I know while she was attacking and killing him and fought for his life, he defended himself against her, still loving her. A love she never deserved from him for what she has done. While she is too much of a coward to even come forward with the truth, she owes it to Gannon. But the lack of remorse and the lack of respect to Gannon through this child, her lack of compassion shows me that we were all wrong. She manipulated all of us, and never loved Gannon, Lena, or Harley. I've sat here for over a month having to listen to her sick lies, even as she tried to destroy who I was and Albert as a father. I've had to sit and listen and watch every reenactment of images no one wants left in their mind. You wanted to leave us with that, knowing it would torture us. But you underestimated me. I am Landon, Gannon's mom, and that will never change. Through my hurt, anger, and pain, I will never be the monster that she is. I can never be filled with the hate that her heart holds. I pray that we will never have to look at her face again. I will continue to hold on to my faith. Vengeance is not mine, as I surely wish it could be at times, but it's the Lord's. I have to trust in that. Thank you, Judge Warner, for your compassion, your patience through this trial. I want to thank the juror for their attentiveness and time that they took for justice for my boy, to the detectives, officers, legal team for every single second they've poured out into Gannon's case, and to the community for your countless hours. Tisha, that was her biggest mistake. You underestimated this community and this defensive team, Lorson Ranch. They searched for and fought for Gannon within hours, and they never believed your lies from the moment they started. None of these people ever gave up on him. You never looked. All of these people I will forever hold close to my heart. Always Gannon strong, my G-men forever. Justice has been served today. Your Honor, I pray that you just give her the best sentencing, the longest sentencing that you can. This will not bring my son back, but I can sleep soundly for the first time in 3 years, knowing that you can never harm, this defendant can never harm anyone again, knowing Gannon will always be a true hero in a cape. He will always be my son. That will never be taken away.
Once I was 7 years old, my mama told me, go make yourself some friends or you'll be lonely. Once I was 7 years old. It was a big, big world, but we thought we were bigger. Pushing each other to the limits, we were learning quicker.
Stauch, Gannon's father, capital F-A-T-H-E-R. Last name Stauch. S-T-A-U-C-H. I'm going to start with something from my wife, not to go out of order, but she didn't think she could make it through it. So this is my wife, Melissa, and these are her words. Some may say or think that I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Letecia. In part, that may be accurate, and I would be okay with that, because then Gannon would still be here. I, too, know the pain of losing a child, and there is no greater pain. We are now lifelong grief partners, as this is a lifelong journey of pain, with 2 sons waiting for us in heaven. I have some words from my daughter, Elena. I will address in the middle of my speech, but they're written in yellow, so I don't know if I should leave it to a child. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever God may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of the wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. The poem I read is named Invictus, translated from the Latin means unconquerable. I quoted this same poem at Gannon's memorial here in Colorado Springs back in August of 2020. Why August of 2020? When his body was ripped to shreds on January 27th? Well, as we heard testimony to, his body was found 1,370 miles away. And then the process to identify his maggot-infested remains withheld him from us until July 2020. As I stated in my testimony on the stand, Gannon was born severely premature and barely filled my 2 hands the first time I held him. At the end of his life, after his body was cremated into a pile of ashes, he was ultimately no bigger than the first time I held him. As brutal as the wait became, I'm thankful to God and the bridge workers for finding him and returning his precious body to Landon and I. I quote the poem Invictus again, not to boast of my strength and perseverance, Your Honor, but to say to the world, I alone can control my actions and reactions. Your Honor, I refuse to allow anger to poison my soul and orient my life to a pursuit of vengeance. I refuse to allow pain to carry me through each day and promote the pursuit of medicinal retribution toward the offender. I refuse also to let my mind be clouded by inconsistency and emotions that deter me from the purpose in this life. Your Honor, the price I pay each and every day for this resolve is to only get pieces and parts of my son. Inconsistently through time. But the pain is too heavy, and the anger too overwhelming, and the desire for vengeance too vexing. Instead, each and every day I pursue peace. I seek joy in my life and let the love I have for my wife and family flow in and out of me like a mighty wave. As I told Tisha regularly at the end of our relationship, my joy is mine alone, and she cannot rob me of that. I will learn to experience G more and more as time goes on, but as I did my best to instill into his precious soul, love, joy, service, and kindness are the pathway to take in life. This picture shows that in the 4th grade, he already had a mind for service. Throughout these past 3 years since Gannon was beaten and drugged, carved up, shot at point-blank range, and discarded like yesterday's garbage, I've encountered many people that would figuratively do the same to me. I've been questioned, compared as Tisha did to my abusive father, and ridiculed for my approach to finding Gannon. I hope now that the world has seen that I was assigned the most arduous task of finding Gannon in the only place that was possible for him to have been, in the mind of a killer. Were my efforts fruitful? I believe so. But from the moment I did not see the Volkswagen Tiguan, or however you say it, at French Elementary on that Tuesday evening, a clear direction for finding Gannon pointed directly and precisely at Tisha. While others online, some who are even in the courtroom today, questioned my perceived lack of effort or concern, I stood still and stood firm in knowing that only one person had the information needed to find Gannon. Now I say woe to the person who questions a father's resolve when the safety and well-being of his children are at stake. I did not waver. I did not falter in the pursuit, nor did I allow the mentality of the mob to shake me. But it was only by the grace of God that Gannon's precious body was finally found. In Mark 4:39 of the Bible, in the middle of the storm, Christ arose and rebuked the wind and said, "Peace, be still." In times of trial in my life, from seeing my father being taken away in handcuffs, seeing that sweet 1 pound, 6 ounce baby boy for my firstborn son being put into a Ziploc bag after he was born to help regulate his body temperature, and now searching for and never finding my son again, I have but one choice, and that is the times of trial and tribulation to have that peace and be still. As I alluded to previously, that stillness does provide an easy target for many who do not understand peace, hope, and even faith. Some, including Tisha, feasted on my stillness, attacked, and yes, left several scars. One of these scars comes in the form of the financial and residential ruin that began in the early days of this ordeal. I'm just going to skip this part because I don't want to make this any more about me. I'm not seeking any restitution, Your Honor. For the $1.50 a month I received from the defendant, Tisha, would just keep me connected to her for the rest of my life, and I don't want that. So absolutely no restitution, Your Honor. The murderer of which I speak was not always such. When I met Tisha, she was beautiful, extremely intelligent, as many have testified to, and a seemingly successful woman. A far cry from the nappy-headed, murderous, narcissistic, and arrogantly flippant human being that sits in our midst today. Having a background in teaching, social work, higher education, certified babysitting, and endless amount of credentials, that should render one trustworthy when it relates to the safety of children. However, although she remains too much a coward to state the facts of what she did to Gannon, too much a lily-livered, self-centered, pathological liar to ask for forgiveness, and too much the facade of one who actually cares for others to have taken her frustration out on an adult or one who could defend themselves, she will one day give an account through her words or through her time. Sending pictures of Gannon sleeping to Landon and I was telling, as the boy looked pale and absent of the energies that so defined him. This is what a happy, healthy little boy looks like when he's sleeping. The next picture. That's what a little boy sleeping looks like. These pictures on the screen are of a happy, healthy little boy that's sleeping sweetly, healthily where he lay. The impact Tisha had as a result of this heinous crime stretches far wider and far deeper than I could depict through my statement today. 2 other people torn to pieces as a result of this are Gannon's sister, Lena, and Harley. Speaking of Harley, I feel as though I've lost 2 children as a result of this tragedy. one of which I will never see on this earth again, and the other which I do not know if a relationship can be salvaged with. Now for Lena. The video you saw as submitted in evidence, her bebopping down the street, is actually an excellent depiction of Lena and her happiness and her joy in life. She is very loving, trusting, and at times way too social. Normally, you might be concerned by your little girl talking to the utility guy working in the front yard, but in this case, it was the inside of her own home that was of grave concern. Nonetheless, her loss, Lena's loss, is like none I can even imagine. She lost her big brother, her only brother at the time. I still do not know if she has fully processed or fully understands the gravity of the situation, but regardless has pressed forward and is thriving as best as she can. I am so proud of her. And these are her words. Once again, they're in yellow, so I'll do the best I can. And this is what I asked her if she wanted to say anything to Tisha, and this is what she said in her sweetest mind that she has. That you do not do that to people, especially your stepkids. And that it is never all right to do these things. How sweeter of a response can you get? Now for my precious, premature firstborn son. Get it? I never in my wildest dreams would have ever thought you'd be in danger, buddy, or I know I wouldn't have not left you. At home with what turned out to be your murderer and the last person to ever see you on this earth. I'm so sorry. Through a father's eyes, children are truly a gift from God, and among the best and most perfect creations God can make. Your Honor, I do need to clear one thing up with the defense. It was said both in the opening statement and in the closing, somehow Gannon has been compared to a demon. And I understand the process, I do. But if they want to take the case up of Gannon being a demon, I will line people up from Alaska to Denver to Colorado Springs, all the way to South Carolina to testify against them. Gannon was nobody's demon. I don't care how much anyone was abused or anything, he was not anyone's demon. Oh, okay. Gannon was truly my buddy. Very recently, before he died, the most alarming thing he did was call me dad. Up until age 10 or 11, I was daddy. But in the last months of his life, I was just dad. A signal that he was coming into those junior high, pre-teenage years. Another amazing thing that is he finally started asking me regularly to play ball with him. He was never too much into sports for most of his life, but that last 6 to 9 months, he really started enjoying playing ball. Some of the most memorable times were him running little 5-yard football routes in the street in front of our house. Most of the time he dropped the ball, but he kept asking, let's do it again. I almost had it that time, Daddy. Oh, and that Nintendo Switch. One of the most difficult pieces of evidence to give up was his Nintendo, because that probably has the most of him on it. Knowing I may never see that again is truly devastating. For him, many of his games were not just games, but a challenge to overcome, as I made him beat specific games before I would buy him the next one. I remember not long before he died, him beating the old school Zelda game he had. As he felt he was getting close to beating the final monster, he paused it, ran upstairs, and we sat at the kitchen island, and he beat it right there together with me. He was as excited as I ever saw him. With all of that and all of the pain of only being able to see him play through the one YouTube video he was able to make, which I'm about to play, I can sleep in peace at night because the father I am and the son he is was culminated as always in our final embrace as he ran out of arms and downstairs to watch Pokemon, I in his heart and he in mine. If we could try to play that video, just maybe the first 10 or 15 seconds of it.
Hey guys, and today I'm about to play some Sonic Mania. All right, let's zoom in. And yes, cameraman is right here. Derpa Star White Gaming. And yes, shout out for our channels. We're going to be doing a lot of these together. Give a shout out to him, his channel, Freedom.
Thank you. I was one of the many he hoped to make and the only one he was actually able to make. I do want to add something that I don't have in my speech that me and Landon already had a conversation about this, and I owe her an apology as well as she already gave me one, that we allowed Tisha to manipulate us into some of the pain and disagreements that we had between one another. And Landon, I'm sorry. But I will say this, Tisha was not the glue to keep everything together. She was not the answer. And this is not a jab, Landon, okay? But Lena still lives with me. Tisha, you were not the answer. Now, Your Honor, if I have any influence on the final sentence for Tisha, first I ask to be stripped of my last name immediately. It's nauseating and infuriating to hear her called Miss Stauch this past 3 years. Secondly, I ask that for every mile she drove Gannon across the country, she spent 1 day in solitary confinement. I think that take us in between 3 and 4 years. After that journey is complete, I recommend her sentence be equal to every year she stripped off of Gannon's life, which for the average male in America right now is 77. So that would give her 66 more years, in addition to the 11 he lived. Lastly, for every year of Harley's life that she abusively manipulated that child, she should have an additional year of prison. That adds 21 years to the total. I think without parole, that should suffice. I pray also that Tisha lives the fullest and happiest life that any inmate possibly can live. I also pray that every night before she falls asleep, her last breath before she drifts off sounds just like the breath that she describes Gannon breathing as life left his body. And that all through her sleep, she dreams of all the fun they had at Disney and other places we went throughout our time together. And that every morning as she is about to wake, the end of her dream, the last words Gannon spoke to her, screamed or cried, "Tisha, stop! You're hurting me! Why, Tisha? Daddy, help me! I want my mommy! Why couldn't you let her just be a mama's boy? That's all he wanted to be. He just loved his mama. I wish she would tell me what those words were so I would know." And then as she speaks those words, the sound of a gunshot goes off and she wakes. Every day and night I pray she relives just those moments and then wakes up to a nice, warm, and kosher breakfast. In conclusion, I would like to share a picture of Gannon in his final state and find a resting place, and thank everyone that has had a positive impact on my family and I. To everyone that has shared the positive impact Gannon has had on your life, from a proud and broken father, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you.